Megan, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Okay, start off by telling us a little bit about your background and what your role at Amex is.
Sure. So I've been in learning now for 18 years, probably almost 19 years, but at American Express I lead Global Learning Solutions, which is really our enterprise learning group, if you like, working with our Chief Learning Officer and really sort of setting the agenda for, you know, what is our global strategy, what are the things that we aim to achieve, and what are the priorities that we have in place. As part of my career, I've sat in a number of different roles. I actually started out in sort of a technology role as a systems engineer and a technical trainer, and moved from being an instructor into all the various roles within learning, a web developer, an instructional designer, to a portfolio manager, to where I am today. I actually started out in broadcast journalism, so had some time with NBC and NBC affiliate and also Larry King Live, and then moved to a different country, moved to London with my husband, and didn't really know what to do there. I wasn't sure the BBC would have me without an accent, so I sort of explored other avenues and ended up in a training role that I never anticipated would happen, and I loved it. I never left, and that's where I've been ever since.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us how you define a learning organization.
I think for me, a learning organization is about the engagement that exists within the organization. So it's like the buzz that you feel around the company when you walk in the door. You can kind of tell that everybody's learning from each other, that there's excitement about it, and that they're really engaged. Because I think that they have to really engage themselves and really pull on the resources and find what it is that helps them develop. So anything that's around their career development, their career engagement, and really trying to help them get to the next level, I think is how you define that. And when you see that engagement and you hear that buzz, you feel like you've tapped into it. And it's hard to explain otherwise, but I think that's what it's about. And in American Express, you know, we have a culture like that that's very focused on people's career and their development opportunities, and really trying to set them up to learn as much as they can and develop in their careers.
Okay, great. And how do you build a learning culture within the organization? What behaviors do you promote?
That's a great question. I think, you know, it sort of stems from the culture of your organization, and I think at American Express we've always been a very innovative and evolving culture. We started out, you know, really in shipping, and then moved to being a trusted travel advisor, and then into financial products, and then finally where we are now, which is global payments. And so we've evolved and reinvented ourselves a number of times. And I think, you know, learning has the ability to do that as well. And we focused on that a lot. We're in the middle of a learning transformation right now. And the way that we approached it was really to consider our employees as customers and say to them, you know, how do you want to learn, and what are the things you want to learn, and where are you passionate about learning? And by doing that, we've taken another customer-centric approach, just like our company does as a service company, and really said, you know, how can we enable and support your learning? And so we did ethnographic interviews, and we got lots of data from our employees. And they're so passionate about learning. They really just want to know where to go and where to get it and how to do it. So the most things that I think that we can do to really enable that is what makes it successful. And so we're really focused on doing that, because I think learning is everywhere. And as long as we provide the platform for them, they'll be really successful in their careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how you say Amex has gone through this sort of evolution.
Right.
What would you say are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the way learning and development takes place in organizations since you've been in the industry?
Yeah. So there's been a huge evolution, I think, probably in the past 10 years as we've moved into Facebook and social media, and you're seeing less of the traditional and standard delivery methods where, you know, 10 years ago everybody really wanted instructor-led training and wanted to be face-to-face with an instructor, and now you're seeing such a movement away from that. I mean, there's still quality instructor-led programs that are really impactful, and you need to have them, but now we're really focused on all of these social ways that people learn. So they're learning on their job, they're learning from peers, they want to learn from experts, and trying to really connect all of those together and build that sort of platform that they can do that. And it's a little bit challenging because it's hard to measure. It's hard to measure that impact, and so that's where I go back to the engagement and the buzz, and if you can sort of feel that, you can see some success, but you can't really put a number on it. So it's challenging, but it's also, I think, really exciting because we're such consumers. You know, everybody's on their iPhones and their iPads and learning all the time, and we're just trying to be the curators. I think that's the right word now. You're trying to be the curators of all of that content to put it out there for them to just just absorb as rapidly as they can.
You have mentioned measurement. How is it then that you measure how effective learning and development programs are? Are they tied to the bottom line? How do you measure ROI?
Yeah, so I think there are two different ways, one of which I just sort of touched on, but the first one is the traditional way. You know, we have Kirkpatrick levels that we can look at, level 1 to level 5, and I think those are still really impactful when you have a critical business initiative. So I always start with your business strategy, and then, you know, what does that mean for behavior and a results perspective, and then what programs do you need to put in place, and then doing standard measurements of those using the Kirkpatrick measurement. And I think those are great, but those only apply probably to about 10% of your learning programs, that you're really going to go to that level of analysis to evaluate and measure. And so now, but we're faced on the opposite end with this social aspect, and my team is really digging down deep into that and saying, you know, how can we measure the fact that people are connecting, and how can we connect them to each other? How can we deem who's an expert in our organization and point people to that expert? So we're trying to kind of take a lot of the, you know, the tools that are out there and think about how can you do those things internally, you know. Not to say that you would bring a Facebook in or something, but how can you help make those connections and put those platforms in place? And we're doing a lot of sort of pilot tests and trying to make those connections.
And how do you develop learning plans for individuals, teams, and for the organization as a whole?
Yeah, at American Express we have a couple of feeds that we have on an annual basis, which I think are really helpful starters. So, you know, we have markets and we have business units, and we really track what their priority learning needs are on an annual basis. So we have market employee plans, we have business unit plans, and we take that information and we try to prioritize it. We look for where does it say there's a capability that needs to be built, or where is there a skill that needs to be developed, and we pull those out and we try to sort of target learning to those areas on an annual basis. So sort of like a training needs analysis, if you like. But I think the other place, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build some platforms that provide some very personalized and targeted learning for people, all the way down to the individual level, so that you can log into something and it knows who you are and it knows where you work, and it sort of serves you content in a more prescriptive way. Because I think that, you know, a learner will tell you they want to learn and they want to develop, but they're just a little bit overwhelmed with everything else coming at them. So if you can really point them in the right direction and put it in front of them so it's faster and easier, they'll absorb it, I think, more quickly and be really happy with that as well. So we're trying this personalized and targeted approach. We're not there yet, because then you have to sort of make sure all of your content is built that way to serve it that way. But that's really where we're starting.
And I'm sure that's quite a challenge in an organization that has so many employees.
Yes, it is. And I think, you know, to that point, you can't go down necessarily to the individual level to start. You have to sort of say, well, let's look at a business unit, or let's look at a market, and let's figure out what their priorities are, and let's build more sort of a bucket approach to that personalization of content. And then you can eventually, I think, get down to the individual level. But that's a journey. That's a multi-year journey.
Okay. And regarding content, is content something that you develop in-house, or do you use vendors? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, I think we're not unlike any other company. You know, American Express will use a combination of all of those, right? So we go external for some sourcing of content. We build some programs in-house, and a lot of times it's a blended approach of, you know, some of it's built by us, some of it's brought in. I think that's the right thing to do as well, because you always want to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of the industry and what those cutting-edge technologies are. And when you have sort of a blend like that, you're able to bring those right themes and those right technologies in. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your current learning goals are as an organization?
Yeah, I can. I've mentioned a couple of them. So we pretty much have an elevator speech right now, a little mantra that we're following from a learning perspective, because we're in this transformation. So it really is about the learner experience to us. What is that end-to-end experience, and how do we interact with the learner? And for me, when I say experience, there's a platform that supports that, right? There's some technology that's supporting what you're providing to that learner. I think, you know, our goal is to make it as easy for them as possible to find what they need. So to be that curator, as I said, and to leverage best practices, you know, cutting edge practices in the industry as much as we can. But bottom line is to build the capabilities and the skills that we need to deliver results at American Express. So that's sort of our driving force. And then all the other things are around, you know, connecting people, having the technology platforms in place, and making sure it's an exceptional experience for our learners.
Okay. What kinds of technology and systems have you found most effective in developing and delivering training?
So there's always your standard learning management system, your LMS, and I think too your learning content management systems. I think that, over time, many companies have learning systems that have been in place for a long time, and you kind of have to figure out how you want to tap into those. And I think that's probably the struggle most organizations are having, and we're certainly thinking through that as well. Trying to make it a great interface, user interface and user experience for the learner. And trying to leverage the technologies that we have in place. But one of the things that we're doing is looking at a portal, sort of a one-stop shop that you can lay on top of everything else that provides a great experience and a great interaction. And I think just lays things out. I'm a big fan of saying to people, what is it you want to learn today and how do you want to learn it? And we'll help you connect to, whatever that is. We'll provide the content. We'll help you connect to experts and peers, but sort of making it so that the user can select those options and then get to the end result. So again, it's along those personalized and customized routes, but it's putting it on the interaction on the user side.
How much of your learning and development programs would you say are now classroom versus on the job and technology related?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It definitely varies by culture, so that would be by market as well. There are certain markets in the world that they tend to do a lot more face-to-face interactions than others. I think that you should be building programs now that can scale. So instructor-led isn't a great thing to be able to scale. So I think, we're really focused on trying to make a good mix there. I don't know that there's a right number that, anybody should be marching to. It's really about your own culture and your own organization. Some of our business units are very global. People are everywhere in the world, and so they'll be served better by e-learning and programs that are at a distance. And there are others of us that sit in a tower in New York and, can handle the face-to-face. So I don't know there's a right equation there. I think it's just to kind of keep in mind for us, we want to be able to scale learning and put it at people's fingertips. I think in order to be able to do that, you really need to make sure that it is, something that can be done from a distance or over the internet.
Mm-hmm. What percentage of revenues are dedicated to learning and development programs at MX?
So, I won't get into specific numbers, but, we definitely make a very strong commitment in terms of developing our employees and really what the spend is there. I think what that speaks to, though, for me is about impact, right? Much more important for me to say, like, what is the impact of learning and what is the impact of our learning programs? And trying to really, chase that, I think, is much more important. And I think, everybody's struggling with that. You're trying to say, if we spend this much and people are, getting the learning and development opportunities that they need to develop in their career, are we also seeing an impact on our business results? And so I'm much more focused on tying those two things together. I think if you can't prove the impact that you're having and certainly the impact on your business results, we probably shouldn't be in a learning organization. Like, we really need to focus on that, tying those pieces together.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you manage your learning operation in terms of content, delivery, and technology?
Sure. So this is a big shift for us. For many years now, we have had learning teams in all of the different business units and markets sort of operating independently. And I would say as part of our learning transformation over the past year, we've really brought all of those folks together. So we're big proponents of design thinking, and we brought all the learning leaders together. I think for the first time that had ever happened, and got in a room together and said, what is our global strategy? What is it that we want to achieve together, even though we sit in separate business units? And we came together and put together a global learning strategy, which has been significant for us. And so as part of that, everyone's really cascading that into all the business units. So we feel like we're marching to the same beat. And part of that has been around this content and technology and measurement and all the things that you think about from an operations perspective for learning operations. So we're really focused on trying to build shared services, to try to say your learning operations should be central so that you do everything from a central place, but that you're able to deploy and implement locally in region, in business, and market. So that's really important to us. And so some of that is around, how do we want to roll up measurement? How do we want to make sure we do measurement consistently? How do we want to make sure that we're using cutting edge or best in class vendors and using them, globally? and really pulling that together from an operations perspective. So, we have a global learning governance board. We have a number of work streams that are dedicated to the portal, to the metrics, to content, to vendors, and we're doing that together regardless of where we sit in the learning organization. We're working on those pieces together, and it's been a phenomenal year because we have everybody's input, and I think that's really challenging to get in a global company our size.
Tell us how chief learning officers or learning leaders can stay relevant in the future.
That's a great question. I think it's really about, keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. So for me, it's about, I'm always interested in benchmarking, the reports that come out from other organizations. I'm always really looking at where are we evolving to. I think we're moving away from more traditional learning organizations into ones that are, differently structured, I would say. And so, it's really trying to understand. I'm always intrigued by how other organizations structure their learning teams, what kinds of technologies they're using. That's clearly going to be a big piece of it. So I think you have to keep your eyes out there, externally focused. And, for us, it's always a really nice balance of, not just looking external and thinking about those best practices and how we can bring them in, but also sharing our best practices out externally as well. I think we have a number of them, and just trying to find that balance of making sure we continue to grow and stay current with those practices, but also that we share what we're doing so that we continue to, put our brand out there from a learning perspective as well.
Okay, great. How do you keep learning and development flexible in an organization that has so many moving parts?
Yeah, I think these connections, so you can have these large global learning organizations, but you have people that are decked against certain business units and markets. I think that's where you get the flexibility, right? You can say we have a global learning strategy and we should all be sort of marching to that, but you have the flexibility as well at the local level with the business units and the markets to say this is a different need and we really need to focus on it. So, I think it's a blended sort of perspective of we should all be focused on the same things, but then when there are priorities, we should be able to sort of focus on those as well. And we're having a lot of conversations around that because people talk about a centralized learning organization, a decentralized one. I think it's somewhere in the middle. It's more of a hybrid. And I think the reason it's a hybrid is because it's about the employee experience, right? So you have to sort of take away all of the boundaries and say, what's the best thing for the employee, and let's make sure we deliver it regardless of where we sit in the organization.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced while you climbed up the corporate ladder?
For me, it's always been really about the balance. I have a family. I have a young family. I have 4 children, so it's really trying to balance, my passion around learning and my passion for my career with my passion for my family. And just, there have been times in my career where I've taken a back seat, while I was having children, and so you sort of know that you're on a different slope or a different scale at that point. And then, after I had my 4th child, just knowing that I was ready to really step back in full force again in my career. So someone once explained it to me as cycles, and I think that's accurate as a woman in having a career, and just really just paying attention and being open to those cycles and knowing when it's time to be full force and not, and just really trying to strike that balance, which has worked really well for me. And just having a great support system as well, family or whatever care it is, to really be able to partner with my husband and know that, dual careers, we are where we need to be at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what would you say has made you successful?
So, I was a military child, so I have spent a lot of time, and then I became a military wife, so I spent a lot of time really moving into different cultures and having to assimilate very quickly. And I think when you have that ability to connect with people in a very short amount of time, it helps you immensely. I think the important things when you're building a career and you get to senior levels is about executive presence. It's about being genuine. It's about building relationships and partnerships with your peer groups. And if you have those sort of social skills and capabilities, I think, the rest of it is really just about your subject matter expertise. And so the combination of those two things, I think, has made me quite successful.
And have you ever had any mentors? And if you have, how have they helped you in your personal and your career?
Yeah, so I've definitely had mentors. I've had one that's been with me for quite a long time, even if we're in different companies and different parts of the world. And I think, for me, that mentor knows you very well and helps you really sort of chart your path. and I think can call you on when something's not a good fit and something is a good fit. And I tend to use them for career advice. When you're thinking about making a move or there's a new opportunity, do you think this sits well with my career, my experience, etc. And I think if you have people who tell you the truth and who really guide you with your best interest in mind for your career, I think those are great mentors. And they sort of tell you the good and the bad, and the good and the bad and the ugly, and help you sort of really think through. And I've had a lot of those discussions about, well, is this going to be a good fit for family? Is this going to be a good fit for career and where you are? So I'm just a big proponent of mentors, and it's one of the things I love myself as well, as being a mentor to people, myself in my career, and those people who report to me or otherwise, and just really helping guide them as well. I think if it's done for you, you have just a really great way to turn around and give that back.
Any mentors that you had at Amex that helped you throughout your career progression?
Yeah, so I've been at Amex just a short time, coming up on a year now, but I think, I have great executive sponsorship, and I think that is the make or break for your career, really. I would say if you don't have that sponsorship, it's hard to move to the next level. It really is about those people who can break the barriers for you. There are talent conversations going on all the time, and when they have those conversations, you need someone in that room, and preferably more than one person in that room, who can speak to not only how you deliver and what your work experience is, but also, the presence that you have and the ability that you have to move to the next level. And I think, I've obviously witnessed people who don't have that sponsorship, and you sort of flatline where you are in your career. I've been fortunate enough to definitely have those sponsors, and I think it's been, really the thing that keeps elevating me within my career.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. What advice do you have for somebody who's just starting out in the industry, someone who's just starting out as a learning leader?
Yeah. I think commitment is really important. When I look for people that I'm going to hire or I'm going to bring into my team, I'm always looking for people who, one, have passion, who really show a passion for the area that they're coming into work for. I think, two, have an eagerness to learn. I'm still learning every day. It's one of the, I consider myself a lifelong learner, and the day that I stop learning, I'll definitely have to find something else to do. So I look for people who want to learn all the time and want to really grow and increase their knowledge. And then I think the other pieces are around, their executive presence, and being able to really present themselves and be professional in a room, and really be able to present a position and come and just have all those sort of professionalism attributes, I would call them. I think the combination of those things is really what will set you apart in the marketplace as you enter, and certainly in the learning field. And just say when you don't know something. I think I'm always amazed by people who really try to continue to push something when they should just say, I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to that. I think, at American Express, one of the things that we really promote is having a growth mindset, which is, being, this is really from Carol Dweck, if you're familiar with growth mindset, and what that basically is about. Really being able to grow and to change and to, learn from your mistakes, and sort of always be willing to sort of say where those deficiencies might be. So growth mindset is really about, being a lifelong learner is how I would phrase it, and being able to, make mistakes and sort of reset yourself and start again. And I think always being willing to learn, and trying to have leadership that supports that as well. I think that involves risk-taking, and it's something that's sorely lacking from a lot of companies today. You really want people who have this growth mindset, who can come in and say, I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to try it, and then sort of pivot or reset the stage when those things don't work out. So I kind of look for that, and I think also innovation, really important, certainly at American Express, given that we're always really innovating and working to evolve where we are and reimagine spaces. That would be a big plus coming into American Express.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tell us what woman inspires you and why.
So it'd probably be a combination of women, and they're all in my family. And I think it's just because of the balance. I remember growing up as a child, and my mother always working and my grandmother always working, and not realizing it at the time how much balance they were able to achieve. And I think it's been a tremendous lesson for me. Certainly as I grew up and had my own family, I can now look back and say, gee, my mother really handled that well, and so did my grandmother. So I think it's about role models as well, who inspire you. And certainly I'm forging down that same path that they really cut as well, and I think we're very successful at. And those are the things I keep in mind, because I think, as a female with a career and a mother, it's challenging to find that balance, and you can kind of fall into these guilt traps. And I always reflect on that, how my mother did it, how my grandmother did it, and they did fantastic jobs. So I try to emulate that.
Yeah. So, how do you manage differently in times of crisis?
I'm a big believer that bad news shouldn't wait, right? So it doesn't get better over time. So I kind of go into, I think, a really close-knit time with my team when there's a time of crisis. And I think that's a sign of good leadership. At least that's what I've witnessed as I was really growing in my career, is to really pull in your team. And I think you have to set, new plans or emergency plans when things like that arise, and really put people on point and be very clear about expectations and timelines and delivery and commitments. In normal times, I am a leader who really trusts my people and knows that they can get the job done. And, hopefully I seek to empower them at all turns and really remove obstacles for them. I do the same thing in a time of crisis, and I don't really necessarily behave differently, which I think is important. I've worked with the leaders who do behave differently in times of crisis than others, and I just try to keep an even keel. I think, to remain poised and calm, and really just get to the heart of what it is you're trying to solve, and get the right people together as well. It sometimes isn't your team. You need to really get all the people in a room and figure out an action plan and really work to that. And, I think people who are committed to the cause will just come into that room and roll up their sleeves and get working. And I pride myself on that, just doing that myself. Like, let's just solve this. It doesn't matter whose job is what. Let's just make sure we get to the end game.